There were 4 of them left. Private Marcus Webb, 19 years old, from Alabama, who still kept a photo of his dog tucked inside his helmet. Corporal Lena Vasquez, the sharpest shot Dan had ever seen, who hadn't spoken in 12 hours after watching Rodriguez go down in the river crossing. And old Sergeant Holt, 52, twice Dan's age, who had already survived one war and signed up for another because, as he once said, "I don't know how to be anything else." The enemy patrol had been tracking them since dawn. Dan pressed his back against the bark and listened. Footsteps, maybe 200 meters east. He signaled to Vasquez with 2 fingers. She nodded. Holt was already repositioning, slow as smoke. Webb whispered barely a sound. "Sarge, the radio." Dan looked down. 1 bar of battery, 1 chance. He thought of command. He thought of the airstrike coordinates he'd been carrying in his breast pocket since day 1, a folded sheet of paper now soft with sweat. If he called in the strike, they had a window, 6 minutes, to clear the area. 6 minutes through dense jungle while an enemy patrol closed in from the east. Or he could wait, hold position, hope the patrol passed. "They never pass," Holt muttered, reading Dan's face like a map. Dan made the call. He pressed the transmit button and spoke in short, precise bursts. Grid coordinates, enemy strength, their own position. His voice was low and even, the voice of a man who had decided. The radio hissed back a confirmation, then static, then nothing. Battery dead. Move. Now. They ran. Through vine and root and standing water, through the green dark that closed behind them like a curtain, they ran. Webb stumbled twice. Vasquez pulled him up without slowing. Holt ran like he was 20 again, breathing through his nose, eyes ahead. Dan counted seconds in his head. 1, 2, 3. The way his father had taught him to count between lightning and thunder. At 48 seconds, the jungle behind them turned white. The concussion hit like a wall, pressure without sound, a shove from God, and all 4 of them were thrown forward into the mud. Dan's ears rang. His vision stuttered. He lay face down in the earth and felt the heat pass over his back like a wave. Then silence. Then rain. Then Webb, laughing. Quietly, disbelievingly laughing. Dan rolled over and stared up through the canopy at a sky turning from orange to gray. Vasquez was already sitting up, checking her rifle by muscle memory alone. Holt was on his knees, his face black with smoke and mud, looking at nothing, looking at everything. "You all right?" Dan asked him. Holt took a long breath. "Ask me tomorrow." They moved through the next 4 hours in silence, following the compass bearing Dan had memorized back in camp. There was no radio now, no way to confirm they'd been picked up on command's grid, no way to know if anyone was coming. They just walked, through pain, through exhaustion, through the kind of quiet that settles in after violence like snow. At dawn, they heard a helicopter. Webb saw it first. He pulled off his shirt and waved it against the pale sky, shouting, his voice cracking. Vasquez fired a signal flare that arced red over the tree line. Dan stood still and watched the bird bank left, then right, searching, then descend toward the clearing ahead. When the door opened and the crew chief reached out his hand, Dan couldn't move for a moment. "Come on, Sergeant," the man said. "Let's get you home." Dan climbed aboard last. He looked back once at the jungle, at the green wall that had tried to swallow them whole, and felt something he couldn't name settle inside his chest. Not relief, not victory, just a quiet, burning awareness that he was still alive when he could have been otherwise. In the helicopter, Holt fell asleep immediately, his chin on his chest like a man at church. Webb held the photo of his dog in both hands and stared at it. Vasquez pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the window and closed her eyes. Dan reached into his breast pocket. The paper with the airstrike coordinates was gone, dissolved by sweat and river water and jungle rain into nothing, a ghost, as if it had never been. He leaned back and listened to the rotors and thought about last radio calls and what it meant to make one, and how some decisions couldn't be unmade, only survived. Below them, the jungle closed its mouth and kept its secrets,